While sit-ins were bringing about desegregation at restaurants, parks, and swimming pools in some cities, the Freedom Rides brought change to the Deep South. The Freedom Ride was the creation of James Farmer, the director of CORE. He reasoned that interracial bus rides through the South would provoke racists to violence. This, in turn, would lead to federal action to end more Jim Crow laws. This is precisely what happened, although a number of Freedom Riders suffered terrible beatings in the process. The first Freedom Ride left the Greyhound bus station in Washington, D.C. on May 4, 1961. 13 young people, 7 blacks and 6 whites, were on board. At each terminal along the way to New Orleans, where the trip was scheduled to end on May 17, the 6 whites planned to use colored-only restrooms, while the 7 blacks would use those reserved for whites. By doing so, they hoped to make statement against segregated facilities. All went well at first. The riders met little resistance in Virginia, the Carolinas, and Georgia. In Atlanta, the riders separated and continued on to Alabama on 2 buses. The first bus to reach the city of Anniston met with disaster. A mob entered it at the station and roughed up all the riders. When they exited, they slashed the bus's tires. The bus left the station but soon had to stop. When it did, it was firebombed. The Freedom Riders barely escaped before the vehicle went up in flames. Matter got worse when the second bus pulled into the Birmingham Greyhound station on May 14. A mob pulled the riders out and began beating them with clubs, pipes, and fists. One rider, Walter Bergman, was kicked unconscious and left paralyzed for life. Another rider, Jim Peck of CORE, needed 53 stitches to close his wounds. Birmingham police were nowhere to be found. According to Police Chief Eugene Bull Connor, since it was Mother's Day, all of his men were home having dinner with their mothers. Americans who watched the attack on television were shocked. They couldn't believe such incidents took place in America. Undeterred, 6 days after the Birmingham encounter, another group of 21 riders left the city for Montgomery. The same scenario materialized as they pulled into the station. A mob of whites pulled the riders from the bus and attacked them. Jim Zwark, a white rider from Wisconsin, was viciously attacked, being left with blood streaming down his face and no offer of medical attention. A presidential aide dispatched to Montgomery by President Kennedy was knocked unconscious with a lead pipe. The night after the Montgomery incident, Dr. Martin Luther King flew to that city from Atlanta. While he was addressing a rally at a local church, an angry mob of several thousand gathered outside. King and others would probably have been attacked were it not for a directive from Attorney General Robert Kennedy to Alabama Governor John Patterson to declare martial law. State troopers and National Guardsmen arrived, preventing harm from coming to King and others inside the church. On May 27, another Freedom bus with 27 young people aboard left Montgomery for Jackson, Mississippi. This time, however, there was no violence. When the bus arrived at the terminal in Jackson, police arrested the riders and hauled them off to jail. A judge sentenced them to 60 days in the state penitentiary. Subsequent Freedom Riders were dealt with in the same way in the months ahead. The Freedom Riders never reached New Orleans, their ultimate destination, but their efforts and the beatings they endured were not in vain. Their drive caused the Kennedy administration to take a firmer stand on segregation, resulting in the Interstate Commerce Commission outlawing segregation on interstate bus travel. Thank you for listening.